My name is James Lavelle, and I think essentially I make music. But I had a label called Wax, and I have a band called UNKLE, which is where I'm mainly focused these days. What's important about London, more than anything else, is how multicultural it is. It's probably was the most integrated, multicultural city of its kind in the world. Both musically, style-wise, club-wise, everything. The whole thing of music and fashion being together was finding identity. As a kid, I found identity through hip-hop and the sort of earlier years of hip-hop, and came to London and met sort of, my social base through being into music, but also through that being into clothes. And those days it was sort of Stussy Crew and Wild Bunch, and Soul to Soul, the beginning of Acid House, and sort of just became pretty obsessive through there. And I also was very influenced by Japan, and when I first started working in the music business, I worked in a record store called Bluebird, which was one of the sort of early independent dance record shops that existed in London. And I met Tim Seminal, who did Bomb the Bass, and he brought these records from Japan called Major Force. And I was very into the whole packaging, as well as sort of an idea of sort of universal hip hop. And through that, I went to Japan and I discovered this amazing world of music and fashion and art that was very sort of together in a way that you never really saw it anywhere else in that way. And discovered things like the beginning of Bathing Ape, Good Enough. Was very involved in that, worked a lot with those people. And I think it started with just a certain group of people that actually happened to be in New York, Tokyo and London. There was a lot of sort of exchanges between this group, and like I said, it sort of came out of, I think, the whole Stussy thing and various sort of personalities coming out of those scenes. People like Hiroshi in Japan, and Michael Kopperman, and what was going on with Gimme 5 here, and Ronin and crews like that. And then in New York, you had people like DJ Jules and Albie, who was a Tommy Boy, and Dante Ross, and kind of, and one of the things that I think you've got to remember about that period of time was a lot of it was about DIY and setting up things like, for me, doing my label, and a lot of what was going on, I think, within the sort of street culture at that time was the fact that as a generation you couldn't actually buy a lot of the things that you wanted to have. And through that, I think, especially in Japan, that's why certain fashion brands started having this, and also, in New York, I suppose you had things like GFS and, what happened with Futura and Stash. LA you had Extra Large with Beastie Boys, and in London you had Wax was one of the things that was part of that. For me, where I was at the time when I was really obsessed about sneaker culture and all of those things, it was, it was the sort of camouflage revolution that was going on, and I think that was, again, brands like Bathing Ape really sort of were a big example of how that really became huge, and it was pretty overfitted clothes, and slightly louder. I tend to be slightly more simple these days. For me, it's always a hip hop influence in what I've done, but I suppose when I think of hip hop, I think it's more of a kind of sample culture influence. I don't make hip hop records anymore, but I still make records like I made in the past, or like a hip hop artist would probably make a record by taking lots of things and throwing it in and creating your own thing, and I think that's probably what I do in fashion. I tend to like to wear things that I've been involved with. I think that's what I tend to retain, is that, I like the fact that I wear jeans that somebody's made for me, or this t-shirt was made for me. I don't mean that in a pretentious way, like it's a branding thing. It's just, I do like the fact that trying to be individual in my own way, just to have some self-identity. I think especially now, because everything is so available, and the things that I strive for was to find an identity, and in many ways, by probably being into Japanese street culture or dunks or whatever it was at the time, it was because people couldn't get it and because you felt unique. And walking down the street now is very different. I'm glad there's a change in the generation though. I think finally, you know, from where I was, you know, there's been some trickle over, and now there seems to be this very strong change that's really happening, and I think it's really exciting. And I think, you know, there's a louder energy that's going on, which is interesting. I was approached by the SB team from Nike to have a meeting. They asked if I was up for doing something, and it was just like, for me at the time, just sort of a dream come true to actually be able to create your own dunk, and it sort of came from there basically. I sort of decided to just try and go all out really, just do something a little bit more unusual. So the shoe came about by combining different techniques and formats. So it's like leather, it's plastic, there's sort of elements of the suede. There's all these things put together with this sort of Futura imagery, and I think what they created that was quite unique in that way. Because everything else was quite subtle that was happening at the time. And what's interesting now is when you see kids, it's sort of gone total the opposite way, and everything's super bright and super crazy. My favourite dunk, difficult question, but I think the undefeated one I was really into. It's pretty simple colour-wise, but it's the sort of the texture of the shoe, the way it feels, is quite unusual. It really keeps its shape. One of the things that's always frustrated me about dunks is the fact that it's the crease line, the annoying crease line that you always get after, you know, too much wear. For me, it's sort of I think a part of being part of your heritage and a cultural thing where you come from. I think it's also about being true to yourself, and the school being your idea of thought and the way that you live your life. It's just about individuality. I mean, I think that's one of the most important things that we have as human beings, you know. And in many ways you know, the more available things are, the more that gets stamped out, you know, because everybody wants to be part of the same thing, or, you know, and for me, I feel very strongly about that thing, trying to do your own thing. And I think more and more, having gone through the experiences I have, having worked with, you know, bigger companies, corporate companies, you know, big record companies, small record companies, whatever, is where I'm at right now. Is I do it myself, and I feel a lot more. I think it's more. It feels right for what I do.